area, as far as our chart is concerned, where God has sent upon the Jewish people the culminating chastisement by Nebuchadnezzar, who is from Babylon. The northern kingdom of Israel went into captivity into Assyria in 721 BC. This just left the southern part of the kingdom to be chastened by the Lord, and they were chastened many years later, beginning in 605 BC, with the coming of Nebuchadnezzar to chasten his people, as we noticed last time in Jeremiah chapter 25 and 2 Chronicles chapter 36, giving the cause and the great calamity which came in upon the chosen people of God, because they refused to obey the Word of God, refused to walk in light of the Word. Therefore God brought His chastisement upon them. This, incidentally, is the beginning of the times of the Gentiles, meaning a time when Gentile powers and Gentile authorities have sway or rule in some manner over the Jewish people. And they will never, the Jews will never enjoy that wonderful covenant relationship with God in liberty, according to a nation and according to a home, until the Lord returns a second time to end the times of the Gentiles and ushers in that great blessed millennial kingdom, when the Jew will be back in that favored place with God, and it will be a blessed and wonderful time. Now then, we had just noticed the dream that Daniel had brought to the attention of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2. How that Nebuchadnezzar had seen in a dream, although Nebuchadnezzar had forgotten the dream, he had seen a great vision, and this great vision was of a man. And this man was an amazing creature, because he was pictured as one having several different kinds of metals about him. The head was of gold, his breasts and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, and his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. And we notice this great image was struck upon his toes by a little stone cut without hands, and the great image was cast away as the wind blows the chaff. Now, beginning with verse 36, I'd like to read down through verse 45 for our consideration of the prophetic program of God this evening. This is the dream. Daniel is stating, now Nebuchadnezzar, I have just related for you the dream. And we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Now you see, this happens to be the twofold demand Nebuchadnezzar had made upon the wise men. I want to know what the dream was, and I want to know what the meaning of the dream is. And you remember that the wise men from Chaldea said, well, you tell us a dream and we'll give you the interpretation. But none were able to do this, so God brought Daniel upon the scene, who was able to do it, because this is simply a vision from God with a meaning concerning the latter times, or the times subsequent to that day. And so now we begin to have the interpretation of the dream, beginning with verse 37. Thou, O king, in other words, Nebuchadnezzar, thou art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. Wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven, hath he given unto thy hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. Now please notice that as far as the dream and as far as the interpretation is concerned, we are told explicitly in Daniel chapter 2 that this is absolutely irrevocable. It is that which is going to be certain and is that which is definite and which we can count upon. Now when you have such strong language as you do in the Scriptures with reference to the prophetic plan and prophetic program of God, now listen, you want to take heed, because this is coming from the very God of the heavens, as we find Daniel simply revealing this in verse 28, but there's a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. And this is the one who's done it. All right, now let's go back and notice rather carefully for our edification this particular interpretation which is given from verse 37 on down through the verses that we read. Now in verse 37 and 38, excuse me, we have an inspired interpretation with reference to the identity of the gold or the head of this great image which Nebuchadnezzar saw in the dream. And this interpretation from God is that Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king of the Babylonian Empire at the time, here he is the king and rules over a worldwide kingdom. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength and glory. And whereas the children, wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven have he given in thy hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. Now, as you see, as far as our chart is concerned, we have this mountain painted gold, representing, if you please, another great world kingdom that has come up on the scene. Now look at the map for just a little bit and file this information away in your mind, because we'll be coming back to it as we deal with it later, particularly in the book of the Revelation. But you will notice, as far as these mountains are concerned, representing various kingdoms upon the face of the earth. Here, this mountain, the red mountain, represents the great Egyptian kingdom. Then the next great kingdom of significance, if you please, upon the face of the earth, is that great Assyrian kingdom. And then in 612 BC, Nebuchadnezzar flexed his military biceps and went to Nineveh, up here at the Assyrian capital, sacked Nineveh, and the Assyrian kingdom fell to the Babylonians. And that's the reason why the children of Israel were taken into the Babylonian captivity, because Babylon was mistress of the world. Prior to that, in 721, the reason the northern kingdom of Israel was taken into Assyria is because Assyria was mistress of the world. And now, beginning with 605, you have this kingdom which has been used of God to chasten Israel, and now the Jew is in captivity. The Jew no longer is free as a nation, and the Jew no longer is free to govern that nation, pleasing to themselves, but they're under the iron hand of a Gentile power. And this is still true today. Even though Israel is a bona fide nation, she does not have in her control the area that's mentioned in the Bible, which is to be the home of the Jew. No, they do not. They have some, but they do not have it all. And as far as that's concerned, the Jew is not enjoying a kingdom according to the Word of God, as they shall later on. All right, now, Nebuchadnezzar, as far as this dream is concerned, this huge image of this great man, its head is of gold. Thou art that head of gold, and wherever man, wherever beast is, you shall rule. Here is the declaration of a worldwide Gentile power and kingdom, which began in 612 BC. Now I have forgotten the date, which is a bad thing for a preacher to do, but I've forgotten. I've forgotten the date when it ends. I think it is around 521 or 522, I think. I'll have to check that later on. But we come now to this second kingdom, subsequent to the Babylonian kingdom, mentioned in verse 39. And after thee, after this great Babylonian kingdom, shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. All right, as was mentioned in the dream, thou art the head of gold, and then there is the next metal represented by the silver. And here you have it. The next kingdom that came in upon the scene, and I believe it was around the 520s mark, it will happen to be a united type of thing, the Medes and the Persians. The Medes came in and sacked Babylon. And all you read something about that in the book of Daniel, where later on, after Nebuchadnezzar, one of his posterity was ruling and having a drunken, terrible, godless feast. And the hand came out on the wall, Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. Thou art weighed and found in the balance. And that night, the Medes came in and took over. Now you'll see the two peaks representing the United Kingdom, the Medes and the Persians. The Persians gained ascendancy, and so the Medes had to give up more or less their right to this kingdom, and so the Persians became the superior ones. Now then, notice the latter part of verse 39. And another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. All right, now this brass kingdom is the third Gentile power, according to this vision, that came upon the scene, and this began in 330 BC. And guess who it was? 330 BC, there was a young man by the name of Alexander the Great from Greece. He was only 30-some years old, around 30 years of age. And he headed up a great army. And from Greece, he went through all of Asia. And they just swept through the then known world kingdom of the Persians. And Alexander the Great did not stop until he went clear to Babylon, or the Chaldees, if you please. And there, a young man, about 33 years of age, he died a very godless, licentious, immoral, terrible life. Over there in the heart or the cradle of civilization, he had conquered the world. But he had only been able to do it just for a few years. His life was snuffed from him. Yes, he became the conqueror of the world. He certainly did. But he died doing it because of his own lust. And the 4 peaks of the great Grecian kingdom represents for us 4 of Alexander the Great's generals. Those 4 generals, upon the death of Alexander the Great, they began to vie for power. And it was these 4 generals that divided up Alexander the Great's kingdom into 4 parts. Now, there were the Seleucids, the Ptolemies, one was Cassander, and the other was Lysimachus. Now, the Palestine became a virtual battleground, especially between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. And much of the book of Daniel gives to us some of this conflict that goes on. That's the reason for the 4 peaks, the 4 generals. But Greece accomplished something most important. Being a great world empire, Alexander the Great, as the Greeks, introduced to the world in 330 BC Greek culture. That's the reason. That's the reason today we have in our hands what is called the New Testament revelation from God, which was originally written in the Koine Greek. The Koine Greek was introduced to the world by virtue of this Greek kingdom. And so God gave His revelation of the New Testament in the common Greek of the day of the Lord, which was called the Koine Greek. And that's the reason we teach Greek here. That's the reason we study Greek. Because we have God's original revelation of the New Testament given, because back here He superintended these pagan powers. Right here it was prophesied this would be the case. And this particular pagan power that came in to rule the world politically introduced Greek culture, Greek art, Greek language, and all of this. All right, now then, let's go on to verse 40. And the 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron. Now notice this 4th kingdom. You see the 1st kingdom, the 2nd kingdom, and the 3rd kingdom. As far as the 2nd chapter of the book of Daniel is concerned, there's not a great extensive amount of revelation given to it. Is that right? Isn't that not right? But all when it comes to this 4th kingdom, this 4th kingdom is very, very descriptive. And notice what we have. There are many things which describe for us this kingdom that began in 146 BC, right here. Given to us in picture form by these mountains here. Now then you will notice this range of mountains, there are a number of peaks. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those 10 peaks represent, if you please, for us the 10 toes of this vision, and also represent for us 10 great kings that we're going to see prophesied of concerning this 4th kingdom. Now, the 10 toes is part of this vision. The 10 toes is part of this 4th kingdom. Now, folks, here's where I part company with a number of Bible students. Some say, all right, these 10 kings, that Rome followed Greece. That's true, Rome did. But Rome's gone off the scene, isn't that right? She has. Therefore, there must be a revived Roman Empire someday. a tenfold confederacy, a tenfold kingdom of a revived Roman Empire. Don't believe it. That's not the case. Because this kingdom is a worldwide thing. Now, the Roman Empire, at best, she did rule the world, the then known civilized world. But listen, the world today is more or less civilized. You've got world powers today all around the circumference of this old earth. You do. And this fourth kingdom had its beginning with Rome in 146 BC. But listen, we do not have identity mentioned for us in the Scriptures. We do have identity of these others, but we do not have identity of this fourth kingdom. Instead of identity, we have characteristic. Look at it here, beginning with verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. This fourth kingdom, we are told right here in verse 40, is a kingdom that's going to be terribly malicious. It is a kingdom that's going to break in pieces, and it's a kingdom that is going to bruise. It's going to be hurtful. All right, now verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of the potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. In other words, this particular kingdom, it's going to be a great kingdom, but it's going to be absolutely rent with division. There shall be in it the strength of iron. It's going to be mighty, but it's going to be rent with division. For as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. You have a pretty hard job of mixing clay and iron and making one component part as far as the mixture is concerned. Iron and clay just simply do not mix together. You can just paint that old iron with all the clay you want to, but it doesn't change the clay and it doesn't change the iron. But this is just descriptive of something else as we see just a little later. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle or broken. This kingdom is going to have within it, this fourth great kingdom, is going to be stout, it's going to be strong, but there are going to be places where it's weak, and it's going to be a kingdom that is going to bruise. It's going to be a kingdom which is malicious. It's going to be a Gentile sphere of reign, which is terribly godless and hurtful as far as people are concerned. It's also going to be one that's absolutely rent with division. Let's go on. And whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Now then, we're beginning to see that these kings and all who are in authority, there's going to be that which is true for humanity, but they shall not, the people shall not cleave one to another, stick together, even as iron is not mixed with clay. You know, one of the greatest things today that you hear every politician talking about is, let's have worldwide peace and great unity among all the families of earth. Isn't that right? They're not ever going to have peace. There is not going to be unity. Not going to be any more unity than, it's well described this way. There may be union, but there's not going to be unity. Take a couple of cats and tie their tails together and put them over the clothesline, and you've got union, but you don't have unity. You just do that to a couple of cats, and I'll guarantee those cats will just fight and scratch and hiss and just have terror. There's a union, all right, but there lacks a whole lot of unity between those two cats. And that's true as far as this great fourth kingdom is concerned. Yes, It is a kingdom which was introduced by Rome in 146 BC when the Grecian Empire fell, recognized by all historians that Greece fell at this time by virtue of the Battle of Carthage and by virtue of the Battle of Corinth. Two great decisive battles in the year 146 BC, and Greece crumbled under the iron hand of the sweeping Roman Empire. And Rome then became mistress of the world, but she introduced, if you please, a particular characteristic. She was the beginning of this great fourth kingdom, which began in 146 BC, and listen, it is going to continue until a little stone strikes the 10 toes. And the whole kingdom then. Turn back to this vision in verse 34 and 35 before we look at verse 44 and 45. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and broke them to pieces. Then was the iron, now notice what happens to them. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken in pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone, the smoke, the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. Now let's read verse 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings, now you'll notice, as far as this image is concerned and the various parts of it, it speaks of kings and it speaks of kingdoms. Here we have bona fide reason and usage as far as explaining what this vision is, using them as political entities, kings and rulers. Now, in the days of these 10 kingdoms, in the days of these 10 toes, what does it say? All right, the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. The God of heaven, if you please, is going to, in the days of those 10 kings, gives us the identity as far as time. He's going to establish a kingdom that's never going to be destroyed. And the kingdom is not going to be left to other people. In other words, this kingdom that God established is going to be a kingdom of God's people. But it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. How's it going to do it? When that little stone comes and smites that image on the very base of its feet there, and then all of these things, the characteristic of the iron and the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold, just going to crumble. Because God's kingdom that He established is going to be made up of different characteristics than the strength, the wealth, the prestige, and etc. of the Gentile times. All God's kingdom. Well, let's read something about it in verse 45. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king which shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. Well, that doesn't mention just specifically the characteristic of this kingdom, but it does a little bit later. The characteristic of this kingdom is a kingdom of righteousness. It's a kingdom of peace. And the Lord Jesus Christ shall reign, and it says right here, it's going to be an indestructible kingdom. Yes, these kingdoms by men, they are destructible. And they will be destroyed. But this one won't. Now listen, folks. Let's just see how certain and how sure this prophecy is. Daniel is standing right here. Soon after, if you please, taken into captivity as a godly Jew. All right, God unveiled the matter of the Babylonian kingdom, the Medo-Persian kingdom, the Grecian kingdom, and this fourth kingdom coming on the scene. Now look. This one went off. This one literally came upon the scene, went off. This one literally came upon the scene and went off. This one literally came upon the scene, and right now we're still living within the sphere of the characteristic of this fourth kingdom. And as in the past has been literal, so shall be the culmination of this fourth great Gentile power and the introduction of God's great kingdom on earth. You see, you and I are temporary. We are here for just a little time. And we see things within the perspective of the moment of our life. But God has revealed in His Word an absolute, accurate plan and program which shall come to pass. As has been the case in the past, so shall it be in the future. Listen, folks, we may be small in number tonight, but listen, if we will simply believe God, we are great in the eyes of our God. To trust Him and walk